Welcome to Cop to Corporate Life After Law Enforcement. I'm your host, Sam, and on this podcast, we share the real stories of officers who have traded in the badge for a new chapter in the corporate world. Today, I am joined by Jeremy Baumann. Jeremy started his career in law enforcement before making the leap into corporate security, managing security services across multiple industries, serving as the Interim Chief Security Officer at Health Partners, and is now the CEO of Corporate Security Advisors. And so he helps organizations build and strengthen their security programs. His journey from cop to corporate offers a really unique perspective on leadership and protecting what matters most. So, Jeremy, welcome to Cop to Corporate.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Pleasure to be here.
Of course. So, let's start from the beginning. Let's take us back to being on the street, being in law enforcement. What drew you to that, and what did your journey look like there?
Yeah, so I would say the thing that drew me to that most was just the desire to be a protector, to take bad people off the streets. Growing up, I hated bullies, and the law enforcement really gave me an opportunity to put my skill set to work and work in a career where I felt like I could have a positive impact on society, where you could be that protector and help keep people safe. So that was why I originally got into law enforcement.
Okay. Were you at a big department, small department? What did that look like for you?
No, I worked in probably what you'd consider to be a smaller department, and in rural central Illinois, the you the money is not there, so you're always working multiple jobs, full time at one department, part time at another. So my experience spanned a couple of different departments over the time that I was in law enforcement, and all of it. I like to describe it as chasing bad guys through the cornfields where I was a cop.
Did you actually chase people through cornfields?
I absolutely did. I have a story one March about a guy who ran from me on a traffic stop, and the cornfields were so muddy at that point in time that by the time I was able to chase this guy into a grass waterway, our shoes each had like 10 pounds of mud on them. So he wasn't able to keep up as long as I was, and he got tackled in the waterway.
I kind of love that. That's like nature helping you out. That's really great.
Absolutely.
So, how long were you a cop for?
5 years.
And did you hold different roles like investigations, patrol, SWAT, anything like that?
No, I was a patrol guy my whole time, so no specialty roles. And again, that's pretty typical for where we were at. Not a lot of specialization. The specialty roles, you had to be very senior to get into those, and I just wasn't around long enough.
Yeah, well, I think that that's relatable to a lot of our listeners, though, because a lot of people that we have listening to Cop to Corporate following us online are on patrol, and they're the ones that are considering, moving on. So, what was that epiphany for you, or what was that point that you decided I don't want to be a police officer anymore?
I think for me, it wasn't. I never decided that I didn't want to be a police officer anymore. I was always trying to figure out how to make the job into more, how to do more. I saw other people around who were, uh, you know, being successful, who were earning more money, who were, progressing up career ladders. And 5 years, I'm still a patrol guy, just pushing a squad car around. And so, I was in a situation where I was trying to work for a couple different departments at the same time. I was helping a buddy roof. I was helping another buddy with other type of work, and it. I turned out I was 26, and I thought, man, I'm 26 years old. I graduated high school in 3 years. I graduated college in 3 years, and I'm 26, and I'm playing all the same games that I was when I was six, playing cowboy cop and truck driver. I like to rope. I did rodeo for a few years, and I just had this realization that I needed to get serious about my career. And so I actually had a conversation with a mentor of mine. He was an FBI National Academy grad. And I made a backhanded remark to him about, well, I could go babysit security guards, and told him about an opening I'd seen for a company. He just happened to know that the former deputy director of the FBI was an executive with that company. And his response to me was, young man, I think if it's good enough for the former deputy director of the FBI, it's probably good enough for you. So I went out and interviewed for this particular role, and the security officers who were working for this organization, they were doing all of the firefighting, all of the fire systems maintenance, all of the security work, all of the emergency medical response, confined space rescue, hazmat, and they were doing all of that for $9 an hour. Um, some of these sites, the teams would be running 2 to 3 working fires a week. They had engines, they had full sets of turnout gear, and I realized at that point that I had no concept for the complexity of security on the corporate side. And it was enough to get me over the hump to be able to say, I'm going to give this a shot. I went from, when I started with that organization, I went from being a patrol guy to managing a team of 90 people and making more than a 20-year sergeant with my department. And so for me, it was an opportunity, and I kept a part-time commission for some time after that, just to help ease that transition. But for me, the opportunity to be a leader and a problem solver was something that I was able to step into right away. And quite frankly, in law enforcement, there is a way you do things. You follow the chain of command. You do what your supervisors say. And there's not a lot of room for innovation or problem solving or doing things differently. And that was definitely something that really attracted me on the corporate side, because I got to step in and start solving problems right away.
Yeah, you went over to be a fireman basically.
Well, and keep in mind, I was sort of the business manager for those folks.
I'm
So,
just kidding.
I'm pushing around a suit and tie while they're out doing the hard work. And but I had to go through all the same training they did. I demanded to go through all the same training that they did so that I would have that context. But yeah, it so much more than I ever imagined on the corporate side, and it only expanded from there.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And it sounds like you got that job because of a connection that you had. It was through someone that you knew.
So, not that job in particular. The reason that I was able to land that job was based on probably my law enforcement experience and just my ability to um, articulate my vision in a clear way to the management staff that were hiring for that role. So I didn't know anybody. I was very lucky, because I would say on the corporate side, it's about 85% who you know to be able to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, that's generally a big struggle for people is because they will shotgun apply to jobs or they don't even know where to start. They don't have the right resume because they only have experience as a cop on there. So, what would you tell people to do if they're considering that and um, they want to find a really good job afterwards?
So the biggest thing is to reach out to somebody who's already made the transition. I help a lot of guys now who are still on the job, who are trying to think about their transition, who are trying to think about the skill set they have and how to articulate that in a corporate setting. And so having the right skills on your resume is important. If your resume looks like a list of trainings that you've taken, then that's not what's going to get you the job in corporate. But just like I said a moment ago, 85% of it is what you know, is who you know. It's not what's on your resume. Because if you're trying to land a job by being one of the 200 resumes that's being put in for that role, you're competing against 150 other cops who are putting in for that role, plus people who have law enforcement experience and have already figured out the transition who are competing for that role. So you really need to focus on building your networks early before you make that transition, and starting to shift your resume to align to what a corporate resume would look like well in advance of when you actually want to land that job. And in law enforcement, you can make those connections. The people on the corporate side, they want the connections with law enforcement. They want to be able to collaborate. So being able to connect with organizations that you might like to work for while you're still on the job is a great way to begin that process.
So, what soft and hard skills did you go into those interviews with that you were confident in already having because of your law enforcement experience?
So I think certainly in my first role, the ability to understand the basics of patrol and deterrence and investigation. Those are all things that translate right over to the corporate side. And so being able to coach security officers in how to write a good report, what elements they need to be in there to remind them that yes, even though this is a simple report, this could wind up in court someday. It's not going to be at the same level that we do in a law enforcement setting, but you've got to remind them that at any point in time that report could be looked at. You could run into a suspicious person, and that report could get linked down the road to some crime that had an element of evidence in your report in it. So at any time, those reports could get pulled in. So being able, that's just one small example, I think, of what translates well, specifically to when you're coaching uniformed security staff. And that there are a ton of jobs out there for managing and supervising entry level security folks. And I would say the other big piece of advice that I give folks who are looking to transition, it seems like every cop that I talk to wants to move right into a head of security role because they think that being a head of security and being a cop are the same thing. And that couldn't be further from the truth. As the head of security at Discover Financial Services, I had a team of 80 people who were employees and another 160 contractors working in the U.S. And countries overseas. And we were managing everything from workplace violence prevention to intelligence to all sorts of programs that are specific to travel security, event security, executive protection. There's just a tremendous amount of learning that goes on as you begin your journey in corporate security. Being in law enforcement gives you a great head start, but the key is to take a position that you might feel like is a step back for you. The biggest mistake I see people make is they'll network into a job that's probably too big for them, and there's about a 50% failure rate. And then once you failed in your first role, then it's hard to overcome that. So think of corporate as a whole new environment that you have to learn, and then spend the time learning that environment in a role that's easy for you to perform. Once you get comfortable with your surroundings, then you'll take off like a rocket. And I've given that advice to so many people, and I get so many calls back from folks who are saying, thank goodness I took your advice because now this has allowed me to make that transition. And I just got that big director level role with that I always hoped for. And I got here quicker in the end because of the path I chose.
Yeah, I love that. And I like the phrase that you use, take off like a rocket. So let's talk about your journey. So you're off patrol now, but how did you get to where you are as CEO?
Yeah. So for me, remember the commercials about Mike, you'll try it. That was sort of the way that I expanded. I was willing to do anything that was asked of me. My start was in security operations, managing uniform security, and I did that well. I was able to translate that into a role working for a company doing the same thing. And then I picked up event security, and I had to learn event security and travel security. I learned those. Then our company merged, and now I didn't really have a role in security operations anymore, but they needed somebody in internal investigations. So I was able to take my law enforcement experience and apply that to internal investigations and go in. And I closed 100% of my cases the year and a half that I spent in internal investigations. That got me noticed. They came to me and they said, "Hey, you speak a little bit of Spanish. Would you be willing to try going down to Mexico and setting up this security program for us for our new office down there?" So from there, I was able to go down, use language skills, use the background that I'd built and the networks that I had to meet with the regional security officer in the U.S. Embassy, to meet with the legat for the FBI down in the FBI office there, and to be able to build a security program in Mexico. Well, from there, bosses figured out I had a passport, I knew how to use it. And so About that time, there was a $76.2 million warehouse burglary of pharmaceutical product. And the FDA came out and mandated that all manufacturers had supply chain security programs. And at the time, we didn't know anything about supply chain security, really, very few experts in it. So they asked me if I would figure it out. So ultimately, I built the program for that company for the US. Then they asked me to take that global. I ended up getting asked to step into a management role on our global product security team, investigating counterfeit medicines around the world. Ran our forensics lab with a PhD scientist who coordinated all the product that we would seize as evidence coming in and out of that lab. Ran our anti-counterfeiting technologies, where we would apply currency grade security features to pharmaceutical product packaging to be able to help patients tell legitimate pharmaceutical product in the marketplace from counterfeit. From there, I got promoted again to run one of the three divisions of that company's security program that was around strategic planning and security programs. So I had to figure out crisis management, business continuity. I got pulled back into travel, event, and executive security. Had to figure out security systems and technology, so all the cameras and access control. I had a team that managed that. We had a global security operations center that we had to overhaul. And again, pulling concepts from law enforcement into how that global security operations center ran helped me be successful in that role. And then it was in that role where uh, we had a benchmarking session with Discover Financial Services, and that led to me being asked to go be the head of enterprise security for Discover. And so from there, we get to build a really high performing intelligence led security program at Discover. But the frustration I found at Discover was I had 82 different vendors working for me. And you had to have a specialist who knew kidnap and ransom response. You had to have a different specialist who knew business continuity. Had to have a different specialist who knew crisis management. And so as I came to the end of my career at Discover, I really felt like the next move was to be able um, to take the aspects of business that I had learned and to translate those into a management consulting firm that helped corporate security leaders be successful. So that's really where I am today. We started back in 2019 building corporate security advisors to be that management consulting firm. We've got specialties now with over 50 consultants on the team, most of whom come from law enforcement and then have demonstrated success in the private sector. Uh, we help organizations be able to build their security programs to be able to continue that mission of protecting their people and passing that along.
That is a really incredible journey. I mean, I'm kind of blown away. It just seems like it's just like your life expanded so much after that, from a small town Illinois cop to, CEO of this big consulting company. Like that's incredible. So if we kind of narrow down what the core um not competencies are, but what it was that really made you successful from the beginning is you went, you left law enforcement and went into corporate with humility, knowing you kind of needed to start, you know, you couldn't start right at the top, but also the confidence knowing that you had the skills to do what you wanted, as well as the willingness to learn everything, to know all the different parts of the jobs that the people under you would be doing. What are some other just really core things that people should bring with them?
Yeah, so problem solving skills are really important, and thinking about the humility is a big piece of it. A lot of folks feel like they need to have all the answers, and that's just not the case. When I got tasked with supply chain security, I didn't know the first thing about it. I literally knew nothing about that, but it was given to me and I had to go solve it. So I had to go to my network and figure out like who out there is an expert and will they help me? Went to a guy, another great ex-cop, a guy by the name of Chuck Forsyth, who many people in supply chains, he's a guru, a legend in supply chain security, former cop in the Northeast. And I went to Chuck and I said, introduced myself, explained my situation, said, can you help me? And he sat me down and ran me through the basics of everything that I needed to know and became a mentor for me during my time in that specific vertical. And he helped me. And so it's one of the reasons now I pass it along when folks reach out to help, reach out for help, because I got that help from other people. And ultimately, if you have that humility, you have the ability to problem solve, you figure out what those guardrails are and stay between them, then that's really what it takes. You've got to have sort of that mindset of get the job done, be creative, but execute the task. The one challenge I would say that holds people back is if they come in with this mindset, perhaps from too much time in law enforcement, of like waiting to be told what to do next. That's where you'll see guys really struggle and gals struggle, is that the job, you're expected to accomplish the mission. You're expected to stay between the lines, but you're expected to get the job done. And there's not a lot of construct as to how you do that. So you really got to go figure it out. And, so using that supply chain security example, I went to the supply chain team and I said, where are you losing product? And they said, oh, we don't have any product stolen. We don't lose any product. We occasionally have a shipment discrepancy. Well, okay, well, let's talk about shipment discrepancies. How many of those do you have a year? We lose about 1.4 million a year in shipment discrepancies. Well, where does that product go? Well, I mean, nowhere. Well, we know it goes somewhere. We know somebody's taking it or somebody's losing it or somebody's damaging it. So ultimately, just using that knowledge and background as a police officer to say that product's going somewhere. It's what we figured out was that the suppliers, we said, well, what happens when you have a shipment discrepancy? Well, we just split it with the supplier. Well, now they've trained the suppliers to give them a 50% discount on any product that they claim a shipment discrepancy. And so actually the first big win we had in supply chain security was actually going out, catching a supplier doing this, because we told them we're coming out to audit you. We'll be there on Monday. And then they said, oh, no. We found it. We found this $800,000 worth of product that we were missing.
Funny how
And,
that works.
corporate people just don't think that way. They don't think about there are people out there in the world who are, willing to do that to make a buck. And as cops, we know you put anybody in the wrong situation and they're willing to break the rules. So from that standpoint, it's being able to think about things, solve those problems, and use that background that we have to be successful.
Absolutely. And I think that it's great that you found a mentor and that you asked for help. And having been in this kind of cop to corporate field for a few years now, I know a lot of CSOs or higher C-suite people who were cops who have grown into these amazing roles, who are so willing to help cops who don't know what to do. So a big thing is just ask. And like you said, that's what you did. And Brian Tuskin was like a mentor for me in that way. He's helped me a lot to navigate this life after law enforcement. So with that being said, if a cop came up to you today and just said, Jeremy, just give me like 3 pieces of advice for what I need to do next, what would you say?
It's embrace that learning cycle. Don't be afraid to take a step back to get started. As we talked about, you'll go farther, faster that way if you're willing to come in with humility, realize you've got a ton to learn about the corporate environment, and then be willing to step in and learn, not say no. Corporate is a whole different animal in terms of the hours that you put in. It's not shift work. You're not going to come in at 9 a.m. and go home at 5 p.m. You go from working a shift to being on 24 hours a day, sleeping next to your phone, getting calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. But embrace that, embrace the role, embrace the learning cycle, and you'll go far fast.
Awesome. Great advice. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on to Cop to Corporate.
Thanks so much for having me, Sam. It's been a great time with you.
This video was recorded and produced by Just Talk Studios, the premier video podcasting studio in Bellevue, Washington. Visit justtalkstudios.com to learn more and book your session today.